Okay, I would like to welcoming all of you to joining us here today for this session. We are going to talk about the interesting topic regarding to Web3 and what is the comparing it to Web 1 and Web 2. Actually, as the introductions, thank you for it. Web 2 and Web 3 as well also, this is the future. We are going right now. We're using Web 2 actually, and we are developing since 2004. Most of government and countries are using Web 2, but it start moving on the Web 3 since a couple of years. Web 3 actually also, this is going to be a future of the authentication, the future of identity. We are going to speak about the privacy, security, and what is how we can adapt on it. What we have to do in terms of authentications, what we have to do in terms of developing, all of that we will discuss together. So, San, I would like to start maybe to introducing us about the Web 3. And what is the difference between Web 1 and Web 2 and Web 3 actually?
Yeah, so we all are familiar with Web 2, that is what is most prevalent right now. Prior to our Web 2 infrastructure, we had Web 1, which was basically a read-only system where the provider of content provided data and engaged with the end user. There was no scope for interactivity between who was consuming that data to who was transacting with that. So that was a system in prevalence from 1999 till 2004. And then we have Web 2 technologies, which is basically Amazon, Google, all the FAANG companies are Web 2, where you are using a username and a password to log into that system. And basically, it is highly centralized. So your username can be used, when you log into other websites on Google, using your Gmail account or Facebook or whatever account, you're basically also allowing Facebook and Google to know everything you're doing, and also leveraging and providing them content which they're monetizing. So basically it has created this powerful set of companies that are using centralized relational databases that can put all your aspects of what you do and monetize that continuously. And you have no chance of making money or playing by that. So you don't get any benefit of them doing that, except you get bombarded by commerce that you're enabling them to do. So it has resulted in a monopolization of revenue to these FAANG companies. Now, let's say what was better than that would be Web 3, where you are in charge of your destiny. You control your identity, and you can basically decide how your identity is going to be used. Your privacy is in your control. Let me give you an example. Any one of you who check into a hotel or go anywhere, right? Your identity, you hand over your ID, your passport, to some third-party entity. And guess what? That's what they use to verify if you're eligible and they verify who you are. But there's a risk in that the person who you're handing over that ID could actually sell that on the dark web or anywhere else. So the fundamental aspect of Web 3 is that you want zero information authentication. So you don't want to give anybody, like, for example, proof of your age, of proof of who you are. You just have to verify yourself without providing all of your information. And all that is possible with blockchain technologies and smart contracts between different entities, so that seamless integrated verification of your ID is possible. That's just one thing. And similarly is a whole metaverse that can get enabled for continuous and meaningful interaction, where you are in charge of your identity journey. And the same thing now applies to brands and also to other content, because right now there is virtual identities on the web, right? You have, ChatGPT can create new virtual people, virtual identities, and how do you know if they're real or not? So that actually is creating a lot more need for identity. Identity is now a central problem, like never before.
Yeah, so this is authentication involved from Web 1 and to Web 2. Is there any limitations to implement these authentications in Web 3 from your perspective?
Yeah, the number one challenge in Web 3 technology is that your old data continues to be there. Your non-private data continues and remains with most of these companies. They, through your Android or iPhone, they already know who you are. And you're continuing to use that identity. And there is while there is a concept of deletion of previous data, no company needs to actually do that. And why would they do it? Because it's very meaningful to that. The next thing, the challenge for Web3 is there is no single monetization of someone. Each individual doesn't have the monetary capacity or power to own and run all the services that control their identity. So whereas in Web 2, since you are conveniently empowering and making Facebooks and Google in charge of your data, you had them provide you a whole bunch of free services which you had consumed. So the main thing is who's going to stand up for you as an individual, build and protect your identity.
Yeah, thank you. What do you think, David, about the key pass? Actually, this is the maybe future of the login. How it can be a replacement of the traditional login by actually right now everyone log into the system using username or password, email, or etc. So all of this login, it will be in the past, couples of later. So can you tell us, please, about the key pass and what is the different replacement of this technology?
Yeah. So it is important to understand a key pair to understand a key pass. But even before we get into that, even players like Google have started to, give the possibility to log in with key passes, right? So what actually Google tries to say about the key pass is a better and secure way to log in.
Yeah.
But then you still do not have, full autonomy of your data. Mm-hmm. Google still holds on to it. So KeyPass may be a very good way for us to implement in the interim time period. If you want to log in with a KeyPass, you can easily log in. Okay, so let me give you an analogy about how key pairs work. Yeah. So let's say SAN is a third party or a service provider, and I want to create an account with him. Right? So I use a username and a password. Let's say that those are two keys, okay? But what happens in Web 2 is I give him both the keys, right? The username and the password, right? He can hold on to it, and whenever he wants to open it, he opens it. He doesn't even have to open it. It's already there for him to look at it, right? So that is the Web 2.0, infrastructure. That's how it has been working for the past 20 years, 2 decades. So when you talk about key pairs, what happens is I have full control over the other key, right? Whatever SAN encrypts with the key that he has can only be opened with the key that I have, okay? So that is a public key, and the one that I hold is a private key, right? I use this private key to open what SAN has encrypted. Right? And whatever I encrypt, only SAN can open. So why would you need the other way around? Is because it authenticates that it is I who opens it, right? And it's not someone else trying to hack into it. So it's a much secure manner of logging in.
Traditional login.
Yeah.
So, but what if I lose private key?
That's the biggest issue, right? Today, if you lose control of that, then you are in trouble. So you need to have, a way to recover it. Today we have these centralized providers who take care of your key for you.
Exactly.
Okay? Yeah, and again, that is a backup of a backup, and might not be ideal.
So here it will become to other questions for security, maybe. How this is a KeyPass can enhance the security comparing to the traditional login, as you said, for username and password.
So yeah, just like I mentioned, whatever is encrypted by whatever public key, only with the private key, only the private key can open it, right? So which means that no one else has access to that data unless and until I authorize it. Okay, I say, I go to a user, I give all my details, I go to a service provider, I give all my details, and when I use my private key and I say I authorize you to use this set of data for this particular set of time, that is where smart contracts come into play. You can control that, how much access they have and how long they have it. Yes. And you can, say whenever you want to stop that service, you can stop it. Unlike Web 2, the data is fully in your control. When you say no more, no more.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. When we are talking to also KeyPass, we have to get some maybe real world examples implemented and successful maybe cases for the KeyPass. Can you mention some of them? Is it already implemented in the world?
Yep. Besides Google currently introducing KeyPasses, we have been using KeyPasses for a long time. We have been using KeyPasses for our Linux servers.
Yes.
Right. So
SSH
yeah. So whenever you go and have a a cloud service provider who provides you a server, you use the KeyPass. Yeah. So it's not a new technology or a new concept. Yes. It's been there for a while, but we haven't been using them in
all cloud server around now is been implemented already to use the KeyPass instead of the username and password. Right. So is there any, you can say, do you know any already platform running in any countries maybe implemented other than the maybe Linux server or communicating? Do you have in mind some example, anyone?
Yeah. I think just before we go into the real world examples, let me just give you a quick overview on what one of the research showed us. So there was a quick survey which had happened, and the results of that survey was basically an average user like you and me. We use typically around 16 accounts overall, all across the places. Could be social media, could be internet, could be banking, could be anything. So typically an average user is using 16 accounts on a day-to-day basis. Now, for those 16 accounts, consider you have 16 different passwords. You have one single password. Both have their own pros and cons of each of these approaches. Now, that is where KeyPass comes into play, where you just need to remember one master password, and it helps you generate your secure and a long-generated format. And that is where exactly the role of the KeyPasses come in. As part of the real-world examples, on the same use case, right? If I have to remember 16 passwords or 16 different passwords rather for each of the banking and all the websites and the accounts that I'm accessing on a day-to-day basis, that is, as you can imagine, is a nightmare, right? And at the same time, I cannot combine all the 16 passwords into one password. What if that password is gone or leaked, right? All the 16 accounts are compromised at the same time. That is where the KeyPass is generally used to kind of make sure I have one secure place to keep all my passwords secure. And internally, KeyPass as a software solution maintains that particular dignity of making sure that this particular account is linked with the secure password in the backend. Another example on the similar lines could be an enterprise use case, right? Many of us are here running our own industries and organizations across the places. Now, think of an enterprise use case where the number of users are trying to log into the different systems, the back-end systems, the front-end systems, the databases, and managing all of them is another complete nightmare. That is where exactly, again, another use case of KeyPass is generated. Now, a third use case, which is an interesting use case, is basically from a team's collaboration standpoint. Now, from the teams where the internal Slack teams or you're communicating through WebEx, the Zooms of the world, everybody has their own passwords to kind of make sure everything is in sync. And especially for developers who are interacting with the backend databases on a day-to-day basis, that again is becoming a lot of bottleneck for them to log into all the various services which an enterprise uses, and to kind of make sure all the applications are running smooth in the backend. That is where another interesting use case about the real-world use case for key passes come into play. But again, with all this coming into play, with Web 3.0 coming into play, I think we are bound for a lot of changes as we'll see in the future.
So you mentioned that the key pass is a very good approach to log into the system, but again, we have some challenges and maybe obstacles to implementing and adapting that to in our system in development. Can you mention or tell us about some of that challenges?
Sure. That's an interesting one. I think we have several benefits of key passes, but at the same time, we are running into a lot of challenges in wide adoption as well. The first biggest bottleneck is basically in terms of user adoption, right? There is a set of framework which is set in most of the employees' minds that this is the way you need to log into the systems. Enterprises have their own use cases. Startups have their own use cases. And when it comes to user adoption, right, that is one of the biggest bottlenecks which we have seen previously in most of the organizations, because think of it from a complexity of a non-technical user. So somebody, I mean, we are tech savvy, we generally understand what is going on into the tech world, how do we log in. But from a non-technical user standpoint, that is where one of the biggest bottlenecks comes into wider adoption. Second biggest concern on this part is the initial setup and the cost that is required. So ensuring the key passes into the frame and integrated with an enterprise or a service provider or a startup infra, that itself is a little bit of tricky process to kind of make sure all the passwords are being managed and you are making sure that complete authentication is being taken into single framework. And the third one is basically even if you pass these two hurdles, the third one is how do you integrate with all the other services which are running in the backend. That is, one aspect is the user phenomena of it, where the actual user is trying to log into the various services. But there is another phenomena which has to be considered is all the different services which are running in the backend, which are non-user services, right? Think of it as a database, for example, or as application, or as any use case which the enterprise is running onto. Consider the number of products which goes out of an enterprise organization. So all those use cases and making sure all those products from both the personal, the user, as well as the industrial applications that we are running into, all of that has to be integrated. That is where the biggest three drawbacks that we have seen, though it has a lot of potential of overcoming these challenges in future. There's a lot of integration aspect which is coming in, the organization, and multiple use cases are being trying to evolve over there, but essentially it is becoming as a bottleneck, and what we have seen is, again, Web 3.0 with decentralized identities and service providers which make sure that there is a single framework, single entity for Web 3.0 for logging into any sort of system. That is where, again, we are saying that this would potentially be another use case, and where we might eventually overcome the hassles that are existing today with the KeyPass framework.
Okay, great. If we are going to talk about Web3 authentications, we have to mention biometric authentications. Biometric, I think we already worked on it, and we already used, which is Face ID in the iPhone, face recognitions actually, voice recognitions, or even fingerprint. So can we use this authentications or type of authentications Web3? What do you think, Mohan?
Like if we take the day-to-day routine, so we are so much stick to our mobile phones, laptops, which means I'm authenticating my device directly with my fingerprint, for example, and I don't need any credentials to access my further system. So that is a kind of Web3 feature which is there in Web3 integrations, that is digital identity, right? So if I talk about the legacy system like Gmail, Facebook, or any private identity management system, so they take over your complete data and they say, okay, this is the person who is accessing, and I'll start backtracking all his activities, which is a business model for any of the application which is there in the system, which is directly connected to the centralized system. Biometrics is yes, but the application connected to biometric are very less because we can't track the data. That's where the actual money lies in the business.
Yeah, so you mentioned centralized system. Actually, our Web3, everyone knows, is decentralized. So how we can store this biometric data and decentralize store?
See, when we talk about decentralization, we have Web3 wallets. One of the biggest example of wallet is Metaverse, right? So everyone has Metaverse wallet. So if I'm authenticating any of the Web3 platforms, either I should own one of the wallets. That wallet will interact with the decentralized data centers across all the stakeholders, which means I'm not depending on any Google or Facebook server for my authentication. Let's say an example, Google changes his privacy policy and I'm not able to log in. That's a bottleneck. Whereas this decentralization has no regulatory. I'm authenticating, I'm the owner of my credentials, and I have rights to access all the data sets.
Okay.
I would like to add to that. So from what Google is trying to do, what have they done is you have the key pass, and that key pass is linked with your device. Okay, the device for which you have your biometric information. It may be your fingerprint, it may be your Face
Would
ID.
be linked to that.
Yeah, so the key pass is linked to the biometric information. That's what Google is doing. So that may be the only way that decentralization and biometric,
It will not be decentralized.
yeah, could come together. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we will talk about user experience and adoptions here. How user experience can feeling right now, how we can moving forward to the Web3. What is the Web3 can be helping us or in the couples of years, and how will be easy to lead the peoples to moving there. This is what we would like to know, or from maybe San, if he's maybe gonna to tell us about that, how maybe Web3 can improve user experience.
So how would we actually want to log into our desired system is keep complete control of our identity and seamlessly log in. Like, I'll give you an example. When you go through airport security, which all of you have done, just to prove your identity, it takes so many hours. So the alternate option that many of these governments give is a clear pass or TSA pass, where you pay an agency money and they rapidly push you through security, because now that company is able to give you a way to get through security rapidly. Now, you have to pay a price from your own pocket to do that. That, as opposed to the Web 2 technologies where Google and Facebook and Apple monetize your identity. The next problem of identity is that most of identities get stolen. Your credit card is almost always stolen, your driving license and passport, right? And it's all in the dark web. Most recently, just as early as yesterday, the state of Louisiana in US and another state, they lost almost like 30 million IDs. That means they're all out there online available for hackers to buy and use, which means millions and billions of data and our additional fraud is going to guaranteed happen in your name. And you, as Mr. Innocent, is going to suffer because your credit will suffer even if it was somebody else's fault. And can you imagine that? I mean, how do you then protect yourself? I mean, there is instances where people have stolen homes of others because your home documents and paperwork is very, very easy to steal. I mean, people go on vacation and by the time they come back, their home vanishes in the United States. So again, that's a completely unacceptable system. So only smart contracts and blockchain can actually solve this problem, because none of the cities or states are running modern systems to prevent fraud. And, so that all requires someone to step up and build that infrastructure. And that's where the challenge is.
So, Nitin, what do you think about influencing? What is the methodologies or maybe factors we can influencing a new user to adopt to the new technology like this?
I think that's a good one, and thanks Wasim for having this. I think there are several instances which has been seen recently. One instance which comes to mind is the scalability aspect. So if you think from a scalability standpoint, once Web 3.0 is a full-blown solution, right? I think the way an average user is used to logging into the systems, that is going to completely change. So if you're logging into your various Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagrams, and any account, right? Usernames, passwords, you think of it as just as a centralized model or a decentralized identity rather. So you can use the same identity across all the platforms that you're using today and without any sort of an impact or on the privacy or any additional metadata that needs to be shared as part of your initial account creation. It's a single standard centralized platform which provides all the information for a user, which cannot be tampered with and which cannot be impacted in any sort of way. That's basically the immutable property of a blockchain ledger which comes into the play. Second is, on the similar lines, from a user experience standpoint, okay, so this is a solution that we have today, but from a user experience, it is a completely automated driven solution. So think of it as just moving from one building to another building, same way you're accessing every account of yours just as a cakewalk for you, right? So you not even realize whether and where and how you are logging into the devices. Because in the back end, everything gets integrated from one platform to another. Everybody understands what the interfaces are, how the communication is happening, and what's the security timeline looks like for having those decentralized identities in place. And that is where the biggest incoming impact on a new user would be from a user experience standpoint. But considering it from a widespread adoption, I think we are still a little bit far away from a widespread adoption of 3.0, though it's still very early into the discussions. Few of the enterprises, and we at Cisco are definitely experimenting with some of these solutions, and you'll hear more in the next few months. But essentially, there is a lot of investment and a lot of focus from all across the enterprises and the places that is going on into the Web 3.0 world.
Great. So, would you like to add something? Okay. Mohan, so I would like to ask you, okay, so how we can build, okay, the confidence and enhancing the trustable with this type of authentications for Web3?
So I'll give you a simple example where everyone knows it already, but still we are not using it. We have incognito browser and a regular browser. The regular browser, which means we are compromising our data, sharing all the information, what we search, what we want, and what we don't want in the form of cookies, right? And we also have incognito browser. We have already adapted saying that, let's say I want to fly from Dubai to California in next 1 month. So I want the ticket recommendation. That's an indirect agenda or indirect mistake or known mistake which I'm doing to share the information. That might be a plus from one perspective. If a person doesn't want that way, he can switch to incognito mode, which is not doing right now. Another browser, for example, which I would like to give is Brave, which is built on Web3. And people are not using it extensively. So once they start exploring a Brave browser, they get to know what is the difference of the legacy browsers, what we have in the system versus the Brave browser. I think it's one's individual's wish to explore, to come out of the comfort zone, and I want to explore, and I want the decision to be done according to myself. And I would say 90% of the audience or 90% of the users, they want recommendation, because of which we are still sticking to the decentralized authentication layer. That is Web 2.0.
Yes, for sure. So when we are talking about we have talked already about biometric authentications, and we talk about key pass. But as we said, this is a key pass. It sometimes is like centralized. But this is the opposite than the decentralizations of the Web3. So here it's comes something new called decentralized user identity. So what is this? Can you tell us about it, please?
Yeah, so when you talk about decentralized identity, there are actually two aspects to it. One is a decentralized identifier, and the other one is a verifiable credential. So it is very easy for us to mistake that our identity is based on what we, all the certificates that we got, your licenses, your passport, and all that. But in actuality, in the Web3 world, your identity is actually your shopping history, your your grocery history, what you buy, where you buy it from, what you like, what are the brands. So that information, that is your actual identity, right? So, and we very carelessly leave it around for others to use it, yeah, and target marketing towards us, right? So when you take this identity, and if you want to control this identity, and you want to have full autonomy of it, full, you want to control who wants to see it and who does not have to see it, then that is where, decentralized identity come into picture. Like when Mohan said, people still want recommendations, right?
Yeah.
So I can decide where to, get recommendations from. I can give them access to my data, get recommendations, and I can get my identity back. They don't have to hold on to my identity, to my information, right? So that is where decentralized identity comes in.
Yeah, so verifiable credentials here, there is, when we talk about decentralized identity, there is something called verifiable credentials. How this will be worked? Yeah, but just tell the audience, because maybe not all of them technical, be on the high level and try to introduce them about the the mechanism of this working.
Right. So when we talk about verifiable credentials, you still have to know that who are the parties involved in a particular credential, right? So let's say I need to get a driver's license, right?
Yeah.
So there are two parties to it. One is the provider, and the other one is the receiver. So you need to have two identities and a document or a credential that ties them both together, right? So decentralized identity authenticates who is the provider, who is the receiver, and the credential itself becomes verifiable, right? So you can go verify who has issued it, and that can be authenticated, who has received it, and that can be authenticated, and what they have received can be authenticated. So that is a verifiable credential,
Very good.
and it's starting to be adopted widespread.
Yes, so Nitin, can you tell us maybe more about decentralized identity and what is the advantages and disadvantages of it? So we already knows now what is decentralized identity, but where we have to use it, what is the advantage of it, and what is this advantage in terms of our life, in terms of Web3?
Right. So I think when we have to summarize kind of making sure the use cases from what it means for you and me, right? Think of it as a typical example where probably an average user is kind of accessing his or her Facebook or Instagram account, right? And all of a sudden, your boss pings you or emails you something, and you randomly move on to your Outlook or any other platform which you are using, or could be your Gmail account as well. Third use case could be at the same moment, you need to make a payment to your friend, right? You need to send some amount to your friend who's in urgent need of something, and he just pings you, he's in an emergency, and he's asking for a bit of your help. So essentially these three use cases, right, which is like a very straightforward use cases in terms of a typical leverage user's life, right? Within these three frameworks itself, I have accessed at least 8 different accounts of whatever the backend system I am using. Now, with this decentralized mechanism, you won't even have to log in into any of these services once your decentralized identity is there, which means I, as an average user, will have our own decentralized identity, and nobody has a control over it apart from you. You have full privacy controls, you have full user controls, what metadata you want to share, what exact information, to the pinpointed information you want to share to the blockchain system, you have that control, which means all of us in this room would be super powerful in terms of our privacy and control structure, and also from a security standpoint, once Web 3.0 is incoming. Now, for an average user like us, right, this is a huge deal, right? Because if you think of it as a Facebook or a Meta or any of these social networking platforms, right, the general typical model is, the concept rather is basically they try to, if you've seen the Facebook's tagline, right, they are trying to connect people. That is what Facebook already goes ahead and talks about the concept. Now, as part of the model in the back end, what happens to your data? I think everybody knows, right? So, and we don't have any control over it because there is already lots and lots of information which we've already shared on all the social media accounts. And I was just running a typical example on what Google knows about me personally.
If you save the password in Google, he will know everything.
They know everything. And I was literally surprised to the fact that Google knows more about me than myself.
Yes.
Each and every data, where I was last 10 years, what I've done, what exactly information, the pinpointed information, Google has lot more data which a human brain can remember. And they will give you super personalized ads and experiences based on all the data that they have collected. Now, again, we don't have any control over it. That's the biggest drawback. And that is where the evolution of authentication, right, the topic that we're talking about, that is going to change big time once Web 3.0 comes into the frame.
Great. Would you like to add something? Yeah.
No. So as Nitin was saying, Google is taking the complete data of it. The first thing first anyone is going to give is a freebies.
Oh.
So that's where we are getting trapped in terms of, okay, there's something freebies which I can access and which is personal as well as professional. When I get into the trap, which means I'm getting compromised the complete identity of my digital assets.
Yes.
Yes.
So there is something here we might talking about single sign-on. Maybe everyone is using, and there is different system as well also implemented in Office and many applications. So how maybe decentralized maybe processing or systems will be unified our authentication process?
So talking about the single sign-on, like I would say it's an early stage of Web 3.0. Like they wanted to unify the login procedure. Someone was saying like 16 credentials for individual platforms over a period of time. That's a problem statement which was there in the market. Someone find out the authentication management system as a single sign-on, and many players like Auth0. So luckily Auth0 has declared that it will support Web 3.0, which will be under a particular governance based on the geographical compliance.
Yes. What do you think, Nitin or David? Do you have any idea about it?
Yeah, so when we talk about single sign-on, I would also like to say there is some disadvantages to single sign-on yet. Okay, so even though single sign-on makes it possible for us to use a lot of services with the same identity, sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook, sign in with LinkedIn. So it is giving you the freedom to use a lot of services with the same identity, but then there is an ecosystem. They are like silos, right? They have access to all these data, and only those that accept this particular single sign-on, you can use their services. If not,
Yeah.
you cannot. So there is limitation to single sign-on.
Exactly. What do you think, Nitin?
I think when it comes to SSO, right, that is where we are in future, right, I think SSO is going to be blown up big time. That's my personal opinion, because with 3.0, once we have a single source of information or truth of information, I think that is where the biggest impact is going to be. Today we have all the open auth, open ID connect, and federal connects as well, right? In terms of making sure that what the backend features, from a security jargon standpoint, all these features are there that helps us enable the single sign-on. But why do you need SSO? You have decentralized identity in future. Today, I completely agree. I think we are still in the very early stages of advancement in that particular technology. Some enterprises are already exploring that information and that path. But essentially, once the full-blown scale and the scalability issues are overcome, which I assume will be very soon, I don't think we'll be needing a single sign-on. Everything would be taken care by a single decentralized mechanism, which is basically each and every user would have their own decentralized controlled mechanism, which would be used. And obviously, there would be government regulations and security standards and the industry standards that needs to be followed. But once all of that is in place, we'll have a complete and a buttery smooth experience in terms of logging in and the way we authenticate today versus the way we are going to authenticate in the future.
Yeah, actually, we have since 15 years or 20 years, we are building applications in Web 2. All of that legacy systems are already running. And it's centralized and has a lot of issues in privacy and security, as we discussed already. So how we can adopt this legacy system to the Web3?
See, when it comes to adoption of Web 3.0, I would say it would be a very tough time for the legacy systems. If we take an example of banking sectors, right? Those are the crucial data, financials. We human work, we achieve to earn something, and we save something and keep it in a place, irrespective whatever technology we speak, right? So that is a kind of security element which we are looking at. So adapting in those kind of areas, that is one of the sector. Taking a second point as health as a department. Okay, so even in the health sector, decentralized data, I'm not sure how effectively it's going to help, but centralized has built a trust over a period of time. So unless until some destructive process comes into picture, so we can't conclude saying that, okay, we will roll off the Web 2.0 and we will shift directly to 3.0, because there's no legal things as such, right? Irrespective of whatever technology we talk and whatever we do, end of the day, we are bound to law.
Okay, we will leave maybe some, time is up, I think. So we'll leave like a couple of questions if there is an audience, so they can ask us.
There's one at the back.
Yeah.
Couple of hands.
Yeah,
Two questions.
Yeah, could you please?
Sorry, I promise. Am I audible? Yes. So this question actually has sort of what Mohan just pointed out. I'm Barsha, in case you missed it in the last session. Thank you very much. This was a great session to demystify some very complex ideas, unless we are in deep tech, and some of us are not. So my question really comes from Web 2.0 has two things going for it, actually. One is an idea of convenience and the fact that it's a habit. And as far as we know, whatever you said about Web 3.0, whatever has been said on blockchain, there's very rational arguments, but that doesn't really create as much of a consumer mindset change easily. So my question is, hypothetically speaking, where do you see the pivot coming from? Is it going to be governments and regulations largely? Because they're transferring cybersecurity responsibility now to corporates, right? Or do you see enterprises changing employee behaviors and that translating to consumer? Or do you see this as a slow burn coming from consumers wanting greater power over their identity? It's a hypothetical one, but I would love to see where you see the trend going.
I can answer that. See, for example, Amazon is a monopoly. So all brands now go to Amazon, have to pay them a lot of money to advertise to reach you. And Amazon kind of monopolizes all your buying habits. So all the brands are now very eager to reach directly to you. So they'd like to build a metaverse, and that's already happening, like Nike, Adidas, and so many of these brands. They want to engage directly with you, and they want to pay you to be on their metaverse. And they would love to have you have your user reviews and user content. And we at so this is a very useful topic that the brands do not want to pay Google, Amazon to be found. So that's where the incentive is coming, and that's where the future is coming. And the way you can also monetize your own buying behavior is creating your own avatar. Like, okay, let's say you are this shopper that is sophisticated, looking for a premium brand with a certain niche, and you put out that avatar, and you complete your purchasing and recommendation process that you attract. And that's where AI also comes into picture. AI can help you avoid noise and engage directly. And this user reviews, user content, and the need to bypass the trouble that Amazon is for all brands is kind of the incentive commercially that's going to make this happen. Other thing is, all of us are fed up of giving all our identities and having it lost and stolen. Your passport is stolen. If your passport is stolen, you can find that an avatar of yours, of somebody else, has already traveled where would put your identity at risk. So you would yourself want to protect it. So these are the factors that would cause a very rapid adoption of Web3.
I think great question, Barsha. Just to add to what Sri mentioned, right? Part of it has to be done with the security of the overall infra, and a part of it has already been answered by you in a way, which is basically the user adoption side of things. Now, as you can see, there is always a mindset, and that's nothing new with this particular technology as well. That goes with any general technology. It's general human behavior, right? And it's obviously going to be a steep learning curve. There has to be standards, compliance, regulations, which will be evolving in future. And also in terms of security, we want to make sure that everything is intact, because there is no central management system which is in place. Today, maybe we are using Google or Meta, for example, right? And if something happens, we can probably blame them and see that that XYZ organization had a breach. Now with this 3.0, if something goes wrong, right, there is nobody to blame or to say anything, right? We cannot, again, in that case, do anything. So there has to be a fallback mechanism in place, which is one of the main reasons why this is kind of still lacking, that what if something goes wrong, we don't have a backup mechanism today. Because it's an immutable ledger, immutable technology, nobody can do any tampering, but they can still access your data if anything goes wrong or gets compromised. So that is where the user adoption, the security, the governance, the compliance regulations, the backups of the existing infra, all of these challenges are going to be taken into account. And how do we take it to market? So my personal opinion is there's lots and lots of organizations, including we at Cisco, that we're trying to solve this problem for a wide variety of the mass base. And essentially, we are just taking it in a slow pace, granularly, to make sure we cover all the corners and hooks and nooks of the solution before we kind of go ahead and give a widespread adoption to the solution.
Thank you. Is there any other?
Yeah. Myself, Nanda, I'm from MedAvatar. So we are already there into Web 3.0 and also in Web 2.0. So we are into completely healthcare. So when we are into healthcare, right? So we started creating a blockchain identity using a private blockchain. It's a Hyperledger fabric completely. So we started providing the identity for the users. And then what happens is, like, the smart contract has been started publishing to them. So when we try to do that, we had faced a lot of issues with the accessibility and interoperability between the healthcare ecosystem was the biggest problem. And one more thing, when you are talking about the SSO, right? So when I was working as an architect, cloud architect, so I have seen a lot of SSO, how does it work from VMware to AWS and all. So when you talk about SSO, it was in the beginning like this, how you're talking about, like, it is in a single framework that we'd not be able to split it into multiple things. But what else if it has been keep on developing in such a way, in future, we'll be able to see multiple types of enterprises using their own SSOs, like how the private blockchain has come into this. So how do you see that this can be solved out, or this can be come up with a single frameworks itself?
Great, thank you. David, maybe in short.
So let me rephrase the question and tell me if it is right. So you're worried that is it similar to SSO, or how are things going to go for the future, and also about interoperability, right? So that's the most important part of it. You said you had challenges with interoperability, but one of the biggest benefits of using a decentralized identity is interoperability.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So your data on your, let's say you have a shopping, let's say you are using Amazon to buy something, all your data is already there, your shipping address is there, your payment address is there. And that data, if that data is in your control, you can use any other e-commerce site, just like you use Amazon. You don't have to use that, right? There is huge possibilities for interoperability. But from the point of, I think,
SSO.
no, from the point of interoperability from your end, I think it's connecting with different systems, right? Each system has a different type of data set, right? And you want to bring all of that together, and that's where AI would come into the picture.
Exactly.
To help understand all that data and bring it all together.
No, we have multiple problems. Like this is one of the problem statement. Maybe going forward, the evolution of this technology can help us a lot in growing more. Even if you have AI, right? The problem is like the interoperability between the healthcare system follows certain standards. If you ask me how many standards there are in healthcare system, you have a lot many, like HL7, ICD-10, and everything. It goes on like a very big list. So even if you are trying to create interoperability between the standards itself, it's a very big process. It's a complete heavy lift. So then you talk about a blockchain identity for each and every user. Say tomorrow, Facebook is coming up with a different idea where they'll be providing user identity for each and every person. And Google is also doing the same thing. Now, like how we have an enterprises support here for Gmail and cloud and photos, everything has been connected to the cloud for enterprises level itself. What else if it has become the same for the private blockchain? Is there any way that we can avoid it and still we can proceed with the same?
See, to answer your question, we are discussing that particular topic. We are in the system of centralized concepts, right? Like regulatory governance and a lot of things. So when we are thinking ahead of Web 3.0, where there is a decentralized system, we don't have any laws. We don't have any regulatories, right? So if we are building any such application on this aspect, I don't think so we should worry about unless until the government brings any such law and imposes the similar kind of things. If at all, if they do that, then there won't be any difference of Web 2.0 or 3.0.
Okay.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you for your session today. That was very great. Thank you.
Thank you for being such a lovely audience. Thank you.